Content warning. This episode features strong language with references to murder, death, and police brutality. Listener discretion is advised. In today's episode, we're talking about the interaction between theatre, social movements, policing, and politics, making political theatre. This is Spare a Thought, the podcast for curious minds exploring creativity, culture, and stories from the margins.
Riders and punks! Punks and riders! Take a leap into the desolate junkie graveyard. Capitalize on the capitalist regime.
That was a recording from Demand the Impossible, part performance, part punk gig, part sensory experience exploring police injustice and the undercover infiltration of activist networks. All guests today contributed in different ways to Demand the Impossible. Chris, one of the many who was spied on by the police, a campaigner and researcher. Rhiannon, the co-founder of Commonwealth Theatre, who produced the play. Rhiannon was also the director of Demand the Impossible. Bianca, who was one of the stars of the show, playing a character based on herself. And the playwright, Taylor, who was featured on previous episodes of this podcast, The Waters That Raised Us and Writing for Joy. Demand the Impossible ran from the 6th to the 13th of October 2025 in Newport's Corn Exchange. Before we get into the play itself, you'll hear from three of my guests, Chris, Rhiannon and Bianca. I asked the three of them what their first experience of theatre and or the arts were. Here's Chris.
I was a tree in the Wizard of Oz when I was 10.
Oh, well done. That's pretty good, I'd say.
They said it was wooden though, so... Sorry, dad joke. Well, I grew up on a council estate. I left school when I was 15, but then after that, at some point, I won't go into my whole life story, but I ended up doing evening classes, and I guess I kind of wanted to leave where I was living or get away from the stuff that I was experienced when I was younger, and I kind of went through a process of what you might call self gentrification. So I started going to random theatre shows by myself, just middle class theatre, as you know, which is, I don't know, in retrospect seems a bit weird now, but at the time it was like me rebelling against what was the sort of stuff I was supposed to consume, which wasn't that. And then I suppose after that, the theatre wasn't a massive part of my life. And then when I was in Bristol, I met Rhiannon in a pub one night. She gave me a flyer. And I went to a bunch of her shows after that. And then there's also the Invisible Circus stuff, going in squatting stuff. Other than that, I guess I didn't, and I haven't really been that, theatre's not had a big impact on my life in general, I would say, until, Demand the Impossible being the massive exception to that. So I guess the reason why I'm on this podcast is that I was one of the thousands of activists who was spied on by the undercover police. And latterly, I've been working as a researcher around the state inquiry into undercover policing for the Undercover Research Group. I'm doing a bunch of stuff around that. I've known Rhiannon for a bunch of years, which is, I suppose, those two things is why I ended up being involved in Demand the Impossible.
Yeah, so I'm Rhiannon. I am co-artistic director of a theatre company called Commonwealth. Two separate words. Common is in poor, and in common, and wealth is in all the wealth that comes from those things. I worked with Chris and Bianca on making Demand the Impossible. That was our big show last year. And for me, the first encounter with theatre was kind of in my garden when I was a kid, probably quite similar to Chris's. I grew up in St. Mellons on a council estate, and I was just out in my street, like most kids, every summer, and then I was dressing all the kids up in my mum's clothes and putting on plays in my garden, and I just loved it from being really little. But the first play that really spoke to me was a play called Everything Must Go, which was by a writer called Patrick Jones. It was in the Sherman, and I saw it when I was around 16, and it was the first play that really spoke to me about Wales and the Wales that I knew. So it's a little bit bleak, if I'm honest. It's loads of references to drugs and abuse. So it's quite heavy, But within that, there was like people I recognized and voices I recognized and stories. And laced through it was this kind of narrative around an Iron Bevan and the NHS. And I'd never knew any of that existed. And for the first time, I saw like the Wales that I knew, which was quite bleak. And it was around the time of like Cool Cymru, when everything was like, oh yeah, it's wicked to be Welsh. But the reality was quite different. And then also this extra layer of like, oh, you could be Welsh and you could do something really cool. Like literally like an Iron Bevan changed the world. And there was a show that presented that to me. And I never knew that before. So yeah, that's my example.
Yeah, so my name's Bianca Ali. I'm a freelance performer slash creative. I was one of the actors in Demand the Impossible. My first interaction is probably similar to Rhiannon and Chris. Me and Sinead, my sister, we got two little cousins, and they used to come over and we all used to make up plays and dress the boys up in our clothes and things. So yeah, always loved creating from young. My mum always took us to the theatre like every Christmas to see like whatever was in the new theatre in town. So we always like experienced theatre. But as an adult, I guess doing Black Lives Matter, somebody put forward a opportunity for me, which was a work share between Commonwealth and National Theatre Wales. I applied for it, didn't get it, but one of the interviewers was Gavin Porter, somebody that I've known growing up, and he then went on to see a show called Circle of Fifths and just asked me if I was interested in being a assistant director on the show. So I got involved that way, and then I ended up being a performer on the show as well. And then yeah, it just kind of opened the doors to theatre for me, really.
Was that the one in the Millennium Centre?
Yeah.
That was, yeah. 'Cause I remember going to that, and it was with the procession at the start.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was again another very like immersive theatre experience, which really stayed with me at a time of, because it was like, what year was that?
2021, I think.
Yeah, so it was like, you know, I was still very anxious about going out because of like restrictions and stuff. So it was like, and obviously the themes of it as well. We're talking about loss and COVID and everything. And yeah, there's a lot strong commonality between that play and obviously what we're talking about today. Rhiannon, could you sort of tell us about what Commonwealth Theatre is, where it's based, sort of a little brief history of it?
Yeah, we started Commonwealth 17 years ago, which is wild. Going into 18, I set it up with a friend of mine called Evie. We set it up at a time in a very different time to the time that we live in now. We was like 25. We were ambitious. We had no idea of what the art sector was or how it operated, but we just like were pure passionate about like what it could be and who it could be for and how we could do it. And it was definitely coming in and around like we were living in Bristol at the time. Chris was around. There was lots of my friends were squatting. There was lots of free parties. There was this real kind of DIY culture that we created Commonwealth inside of. So we definitely set it up within that ethos. And when we were making our early shows, we were more often than not squatting big empty buildings and turning them into big shows, inviting an audience, not making any money. No one was getting paid. It was like very much like a utopian version of like what theatre possibly could be. But what felt really important to us was sometimes when we were making our political work, it felt like a little bit like an echo chamber. And we really wanted to make work that spoke beyond the people that we knew, who often thought the same as us or had access to similar things. And I remember like it was the same for both me and Evie, like going back home and feeling like nothing really was happening where my family were living, which was St. Mellons at the time. And like what would it feel like to bring like Commonwealth to a community like St. Mellons, or go back to Bradford where Evie's from. And that really kind of directed us back home. So we went from living in Bristol, making shows together, touring that work. And, you know, we toured that work all over the country, to Edinburgh, internationally, like really started to kind of share our work to a wider audience, and then kind of found our roots back in the places that we come from. And that feels quite important, but also feels quite political. Like a lot of people who, and my peers, they might not ever go home and they could make their career in London and do the thing. But for us, it was really important to kind of, I don't know, just be around people. We love making stories that feel really honest and really truthful, and like also they kind of shared the experiences that we'd had in like those early days of making big site specific immersive works. So we're a company that work in 2 locations, Cardiff and Bradford. They're the places that we come from, and we make like these big epic pieces that we hope to tour, or some of them just speak to the place and the time that we find ourselves in. But then also we have like activities on the ground in each of our locations that really is about building on the cultural ecology that exists there. Like, how do you kind of I don't know, like support people to really see the value in the arts and to really love it and have it as part of their everyday. So we're kind of really focusing in on like what can we offer people, and like how can we create political conversations and bring people together on a very local level, and then at the same time make these kind of epic immersive shows. So that's kind of the mission. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. And what's interesting is all of you have identified as your own upbringings and wanting to sort of like be creative or to be in that world, but not necessarily having access to it, or feeling a bit like an outsider going into more of an art world or a theatre world. So I guess it's also like bringing theatre to those communities, as you say, because a lot of the money for creative stuff that stays in either London or in the big cities. It doesn't necessarily go to other places as well.
Yeah. I mean, also like the political situation we find ourselves in, right? Like I was speaking to people this morning about, I think it's 8 to 10% of people are working class in the industry. And of
Yeah.
course, like young people interested in this kind of work is so precarious, it's so unknown, it's so hard. Like my niece, she studies at university drama, and she could never afford to take that leap to then work professionally. So this sector's riddled with classism and elitism, and it's who you know, and it's all that bullshit. And it's like, actually, Commonwealth was kind of born from that as a bit of a fuck you to the sector of like, actually, we're really bored of it being like this. And we're really bored of the theatre that's being made and being made about people, working class people. Like often that's like, yeah, I won't go too far into it, but definitely class plays a big role in our work.
And Chris, I suppose your first interaction, as you said, came through Rhiannon. Had you seen many productions from Commonwealth before, or?
Yeah, I'd seen. I think most of the early shows in Bristol in squatted venues. Not all of them, and I think, yeah. So I kind of had a vague idea what it was going to be, or I imagined what it was going to be like. It wasn't quite like I actually know what it's going to be like, because part of the story is my story is being told, not directly, not me. My personal biography is not in there at all, but in terms of like the movements I belong to, that is. And I suppose the biggest thing for me was knowing Rhiannon and also knowing the way that she'd done the work, which is like, yes, I already had that trust with her. Yeah.
Yeah, cool, thank you. And B, you sort of you have mentioned about your first interactions with Commonwealth. How did you find that sort of like interacting with Commonwealth in comparison to like other maybe other theatre experiences that you'd had up until that point?
I would say Commonwealth as a whole, as a team, are a lot more relaxed, laid back, just down to earth. There's no feel of hierarchy, if that makes sense, when you're in and amongst them. It doesn't feel like, when I work with Rhiannon, it doesn't feel like she's my boss. It just feels like we're friends creating something together, It always feels like a collaboration working with them rather than working for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's more like collaborative perhaps than other experiences you've had. Yeah, and I think that probably speaks to what you said, Rhiannon, about how it's about who you know, but in other circles that you can feel quite excluded from that, right? And you're walking into someone else's territory sometimes. Yeah, and I guess that's was linked to the book which I have here. Promote it there. I'll put a link to it on the
Amazing.
on the website. So Commonwealth have distilled 15 years of work into a book called Do It Yourself: Making Political Theatre. One of the key things, I think one of the first lines is "fuck capitalism, fuck theatre, do it yourself," which what I've always been taught as a writer, make sure your first line is very good, and that's like a good starting point. Could you talk a little bit about the book? And I guess, like, again, it seems to reflect the things you've already been talking about, but why did you want to write this book?
Well, we wanted to write the book because we'd never really found a theatre book that helped us. And we were thinking, like, what would be useful for like people who want to get into theatre and the arts? Like, what would be useful for them? What would have been useful for us? So we wanted to share very practically like a DIY toolkit of making theatre. And so the biggest section of the book is actually like a kind of toolkit guide where we invited lots of our collaborators to kind of contribute the advice that we wish we had when we were getting into making theatre that we've learned along the way. So that was kind of the purpose. And then also to kind of share our methodology and our practice and kind of what the words common and wealth mean to us and how we work with people and how we collaborate with people, how we collaborate with places, how we work in site, and all the different kind of things we think about when we're making our work. Because for us, it's not just about making a show. There's so much that goes in and around the kind of storytelling. So like one of our shows was called We're Still Here. It was in an old factory in Talbot. And there's a lot in the book around the ghosts that exist in places like that and how you build on the history, the political history, the history of the town, the history of the people, and how those things are kind of present in the world that you're creating. Because, if someone's coming from out of town, they're walking through those streets and they're seeing the clothes shops, they're seeing the town, they're seeing the steelworks, they're seeing the light on with the potential of the light being off. So we just wanted to kind of paint a picture, I guess, of all the kinds of things that we think about and all the meaning and all the kind of metaphor that comes within our work. And then also is a real opportunity to kind of do a retrospect of our work. So towards the end of the book is like the shows that we've made, how we've made them. So like where the seeds of the ideas come from, or the process looked like, what we were trying to change politically by making our work. And that's all in just one book. And then at the start of the book is a manifesto. And the first word is fuck theatre, fuck capitalism. The two things are like literally like lots of things very hand in hand. So it's about imagining something different, isn't it? Like that's the kind of purpose. Like this is what we think theatre can be.
And going with intention, because I think there's an accusation from people who want to defund the arts that there isn't purpose or direction, or it isn't a necessary element to our society. But in actual fact, it's like how people express themselves, how people learn about the world. And I mean, I was thinking about things I've tried to do in the past, like tried to like start writing a script for a play or something like that, and I just literally have no idea where to start. But something like this is like, oh, actually there's like a handbook basically that you can start from somewhere and learn from someone else's experience. So let's introduce my fourth guest to the podcast, or welcome back, should I say. Taylor has featured on previous episodes The Waters That Raised Us and Writing for Joy. She wrote the play we're talking about today, Demand the Impossible. Here's Taylor.
Hi, my name is Taylor Edmonds. I'm a writer and creative facilitator from Barry in South Wales. Demand the Impossible was on last year that I worked on with Commonwealth Theatre, and that was my first stage play. So that definitely, like, I learned a lot. It's a whole new form, and it's a form where you have to release a bit of the control in comparison to the others, because there's a director, there's a dramaturg, there's actors, there's in the case of Demand the Impossible, there was like AI technology, there was musicians. So you have your vision, but then you also hand it over to others and you have to trust their vision as well and how it will all come together with all the different sort of elements. Luckily, I had an amazing team and it was nothing but like a great process to see how the words like took on new life and were embodied by the actors. But yeah, that was something very different for me. So yeah, it was hard work, challenging work, but it was also like an amazing process that yeah, I grew a lot from it as well.
And Taylor, what is Demand the Impossible? What is it about?
Demand the Impossible essentially told the story of people who were part of left-wing activist groups that were infiltrated by undercover police. And this was, it's commonly known as like the spycops scandal. This happened from well, actually, even in the 70s, the very early moments of it into the noughties. And it was where like a branch of the police was basically set up to infiltrate left-wing activist groups. So people that were environmental campaigners, people that were anti-racist campaigners, um, even came down to a big scandal of blacklisting with construction workers and electricians, where construction companies were blacklisting workers that were like politically involved in kind of protests or organizing or unionizing. Completely illegal, of course, but they would be informed by the police. So yeah, this whole massive, disgusting kind of thing that was happening. And then we created the show to kind of based on actual interviews with activists that were directly affected. And like you mentioned, Bianca in the show, her character was very much based on her own personal story. So she was when she founded Black Lives Matter in Cardiff in the that kind of revival in 2020 after George Floyd was murdered, but based on a life of kind of like being treated awfully by the police. So she was based on herself. There's another character that was played by an actor called Sol, and he was based on a blacklisted construction worker. So that was somebody called Steve Barley, who we spoke to, who basically, because of his activism, suddenly found that he had no work. And he didn't know why, and he kept getting rejected for jobs or he kept getting fired and he basically just couldn't find work, and that was happening to a lot of the people in his circles that were also politically active. And then the other character, who was played by Hasina Raja, was an environmental campaigner. So there was lots of people who, were campaigning, like anti-war campaigners who would do demonstrations in arms factories, who, were saving trees from being cut down, like all of that kind of breadth of what it means to be an environmental campaigner. And a lot of women were kind of deceived into intimate sexual relations with the undercover police. Some of them, for years of their life were in a relationship with someone who wasn't what they thought they were, who wasn't who they thought they were. And it was thanks to the efforts of these women who kind of brought this whole scandal to light through basically taking on their own detective work and eventually finding each other. The like public inquiry about all of this is still ongoing to this day. So it's very much, even though it happened, it's very much a continually present kind of issue that's ongoing as well.
How did you all sort of get involved with it, and what were your roles? Chris, I know you've already mentioned a little bit already, but how did you get involved? What was your day to day in helping shape it all?
Me and my friend Tom Fowler, met Rhiannon. I think Rhiannon briefly had already had one conversation with Tom before that. We met about 3 years before it actually happened, met one or two times chatting about what it was going to be, what it wasn't going to be. One of the things which actually was decided at quite an early stage, that there wasn't actually going to be an undercover police officer represented in the production itself directly. because of what I've been doing for the last 7 or 8 years, I have to admit I was quite disappointed by that, because I've actually been researching into every single aspect of the undercover police officers, the way they behave, how they report in, all their, their trade craft, the way they spied on people. But I'm kind of forgetting that actually, the reason why I ended up doing the research was that I was an activist. So as the way it turned out, the way that my input really into it was really remembering what it was like to be an activist, rather than seeing everything through the lens of, oh, was that undercover officer there at that time, which I have a tendency to do due to my work. So like, I remember something that happened, which is, a good memory, and I think, oh, what undercover officer was spying on me, or spying on us, or interfered with that. But so whereas even though the Demand the Impossible was about undercover policing, amongst other things, it wasn't just about that, and it was kind of cathartic to just I don't know, be an activist in it, rather than being someone a researcher into undercover policing.
And also, I think it's more menacing when the subject of, the person who was doing the spying isn't actually in it, because it's sort of like there's an aura that's created around it, I think, in absence.
Yeah, and to be honest, the actual people who were the undercovers, they're pretty banal, boring people, but could be boring and evil at the same time. But yeah, so I guess I was an activist advisor. I mean, I don't know how much input I had, but I felt getting to the point where we were getting towards when it was actually going to happen, I felt I wanted to have more input, and then therefore I became a member of the community cast. So I had a very, a small but very enjoyable. It made me feel much more involved in the actual production itself, and it was really fun to be involved with. Not just because hanging out with Rhiannon and Bianca, but obviously part of it. But also, I mean, it was also, there was an element of curiosity just about how these things were made. So there was that sort of just idle curiosity, I guess, from someone who's not been involved in theatre really, about how it all happens, as well as actually, but also being involved as well at the same time was a fantastic thing for me personally, as well as politically.
Yeah, I'm always interested in, like, on the theatre side of, as much as like the production, as I'm watching it, I sort of think, how did they manage to do that? Or how do you even start to practice something? How do you even start to map out what a room's going to look like, or costume changes, or what music you're going to use, and all of that sort of stuff. How about you, Bianca? What was your role? And can you talk a little bit about your involvement in the production?
Similar to Chris, really. I had a chat with Rhiannon about 3 or 4 years before the production started. I guess I sat down with Rhiannon and we just had a conversation about my journey as an activist. The Black Lives Matter movement, just all of that really. And then sat down with Taylor as well, the writer, and she just put my words into a script basically. We worked on it a tiny bit together so that I was comfortable with some of the wording. But it was a great script, and really reflected everything that I had said. And then obviously in the show then, I was an actor. I just gave my own experience, basically talked about my own experience with BLM and everything that happened around and during my show.
Thank you. And for you both, what was that like, seeing I know it wasn't necessarily your exact stories, or there were elements of it. What was it like to experience that? So Chris, and then Bianca.
Yeah, a general comment is that whenever a specific part of your life appears in a TV show or theatre or whatever, then it's always like, I think you can't help but being hypercritical of it. So therefore, when for instance, I suppose the character which most overlaps with my activist experience was the one played by Husina. He was a climate activist, and it's interesting that when I was actually looking at the script and doing a little bit of editing, I can't remember exactly what it was. There's a certain thing that was in the script. That doesn't seem real to me. But then Rhiannon said, "Oh, this is what one of your friends said." About their experience or something. And I think the thing is about all these experiences are very individual then, and therefore even different people can have different experiences on the same event. And I think so the trick is to portray the truth, not in terms of like every single technical detail or every single particular individual experience, but just to make it overall seem like the truth. And I think that's how I felt that it was. It wasn't that Husina's character was a very different person to me, but still, like it felt, real. It felt real to me.
Yeah, and that's good writing, isn't it? It's like it speaks the truth, even if it isn't what the blow by blow account of what actually happened. It caught the essence. And Bianca, how was that seeing? Reliving some of those experiences, because obviously there's very tough subject matter in the play as well. How was that going through that and being part of it, witnessing what you were experiencing?
So for me, it was my exact story throughout the whole show. So it was very emotional, but not necessarily in a bad way. I think during BLM, everything was just go, 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 go. I don't think I really had a moment to like sit back and think about everything that actually happened and really deepen the things that happened, not just to the people that we were protesting for, but to myself with, my own interactions with the police because of the protesting and things like that. I don't think I really, at the time, it was just sort of autopilot mode. Whereas the show really gave me a moment to sit with my own story and let it land. And sort of, it was healing. It was beautiful, and it was sad.
Was there an element of sort of catharsis from it as well? Did you feel like it was a sort of chapter end, or was it? How did you feel about it?
Yeah, that's sort of, but not completely. The scene in the show where I say the 9-minute speech and I'm talking about all the individual lives that have been lost at the hands of the police. Those names live with me on a daily basis. So sort of close the chapter on my own injustice, I guess, that I faced because of the police, but not the other injustices that, that still exist, that still don't have justice, that still live with me every single day. And, all of those stories, might not even known them, met them, or even the families of some of them, but they stay with me every single day. And I don't think that feeling will ever leave of, holding on to those stories and holding on to wanting to seek justice for those, for those families and for those individuals.
We take the knee outside the Senate. We fill the steps, knees to slate. The police are lined up, facing us. Robotic, emotionless. Their faces don't even crack. Does a single one of them care? Can't they cry with us? Black Lives Matter! I can't believe that these words have to leave my mouth. Black Lives Matter! Take the knee, I shout at the officers next to me. Take the knee! They don't look. They choose not to see me. A woman puts her arm on my shoulder. Don't you cry, she tells me. Don't you dare let them see you cry. We kneel, silent, for 9 minutes. 9 minutes, George Floyd had a knee to his neck, suffocating in the street. What can happen in 9 minutes? Stephen Lawrence, waiting for a bus, is stabbed and left to bleed out. His family, campaigning for justice, are spied on by the police who should have been finding his murderers. 5 black men from Butte Town are jailed for the murder of Rhiannon White with no evidence. The real murderer, a white man, walks free for another 13 years. Students Marcus Walters and Francisco Borg are attacked in their car on City Road by a gang of white skinheads. The police watch on, then arrest the victims. Mahmoud Mohammed Hassan takes his last breath in his bed after he was assaulted in police custody. Moya Bashir, injured and in a mental health crisis, is killed by the police as he was forcibly restrained. Frank Bailey, missing, is dismissed by the police because of his class and colour. I kneel for every black life cut short. Everywhere I go, there's an angel there. Everywhere I go, there's an angel there. Everywhere I go, there's an angel there.
And Rhiannon, in terms of your role, what was your main role in the production? And then also, I suppose, the logistics of getting from the writing into the reality as well.
I was the director. The way we make work isn't like, it's really collaborative. So when I say director, I say that with a little d, because everyone's kind of chipping away and devising all the time with the script. These guys have like kind of touched on it, but we interviewed loads of people and that was such a big part. Chris and Tom was such a big part of that process of like such complicated, complex thing to tell a story about. And I was really aware that that had been done in some uncompromising ways in the past, and probably still is told in different ways that might not sit comfortably with people. So it was really important to really be led by these guys and really be open to where that took us. And then Bianca as well, stepping in and being interviewed. And then we interviewed lots of people whose lives have been impacted, from the blacklisting campaign to people who've been spied on, people who'd had relationships with coppers, to build a bit of a picture and a bit of a story. And we took all of that material, and Chris and Tom, and the actors, and then some of the creative team. So we had like a creative technologist who played a massive role in the show, who in a way was the state, or was this kind of surveillance, reframing, retelling a narrative with his phone character that existed in the world, who was also responsible for like some of the visual worlds that was making the show so immersive. We worked with a choreographer, we worked with a dramaturg, we worked with a set designer. We had quite a big team to really kind of build a world for the audience to sit in. And obviously we had the musicians as well. And a big part of the show was kind of creating a site, like somewhere where the audience would be familiar. So that was the whole reason for staging it in the Corn Exchange, was that we could set it as a punk gig. Like, it was really important for us to set it as a punk gig. In the early days, we were kind of experimenting with where it could be. So we were working in like the back of a pub on Newport Road, like just places where activists might have met or might have hung out. Like, we were trying to find like a place that felt suitable to the story we were trying to tell. And then finally we found the Corn Exchange in Newport. It was a music venue. We brought up a punk band that I've known for ages that would have played some of the squat parties in Bristol back in the day. So they composed all the music. It was all brand new music that you heard. Jason, the lead singer, played a bit of a role as a bit of a crazy narrator who kind of repositioned us in the present day, which allowed us to kind of talk big, like about the political context we find ourselves in now. So, you know, took us to Palestine Action, took us to genocide, took us to what was happening, how people were being arrested at the time and what that looks like. And more like a quite dystopian moment So what helped make it strong was all the contributions from the activists, and like being able to kind of really find some kind of honesty, I guess. And the thing that I loved, one of my favorite scenes, and there's many that I have, but what I think was the heartbeat of the show was this moment where everything dropped and the community cast that we worked with, Chris was one of them. There was a scene where they got asked questions on 2 chairs, and the questions we asked were about power, were about love, were about what we want the future to be like. And like looking back now, I'm like, these are all the reasons why people come together to protest and to make political change. Like this is literally like the soul of the reason why. And then one of the audience who came to see the show, sent me an email and they referred to it as a love letter to activism. And I think actually there's something in there. Like I feel like it was a love letter to activism, especially that bit of what it means to be human. And that feels really important when you make political theatre, is that you're not just telling people didactically what to think about the world, but you're really tapping into like the human condition and the things that we can all connect to in some way.
I mean, it speaks also to this thing of like political theatre, and the difference that, I mean, all art is political in some sense, and also I believe, but maybe that I'm biased because I studied politics, that everything is political. You know, you choosing not to engage is also a political act, because the politics will continue around you. You know, who you're able to marry, or whether you're able to get a job, or you know, whether your childcare is paid for you or not. All these things are political choices and decisions. And I suppose that production spoke of our relationship to one another and the state, and who do you trust. And the fact, you know, that some very shocking, I mean, there's so many sort of shocking revelations in it. But I suppose if you're an activist, then you know a lot of this. But if you're maybe not been involved in that world, having, for example, one of the characters having a relationship for multiple years with someone who was pretending to be an activist and was actually a police officer. But then also like how many of the characters, many of the actors and their portrayal of it deliberately made to feel paranoid about their surroundings, to seem like they're like, you know, that they're the problem, not, you know, the state having a strong arm into their lives and targeting them. So I think, yeah, that speaks so much to sort of the political nature of it. And you're so right about it referencing the now, because that's so important to go, this is a thing that's ancient history. This is a thing that's ongoing injustice still. There's not justice for a lot of the people that were mentioned in there.
I would just like to say that like the show was it time traveled. We could have very easily focused on one section of like the story of one period. But during our research, we went to the public inquiry that Chris has been so involved in with Tom, and it was really insightful to be like, actually, this state is, you know, this infiltration is like happened across decades and decades of time, and like absolutely destroyed so many people's lives from so many different times. And it was really important to be able to kind of show the breadth of that, and actually the kind of different campaigns that were affected by that, which were, correct me, Chris, if I say anything, but like, you know, they fundamentally spied more on the left than the right. You know, all of the characters in the show are based on people that, an amalgamation of people that we know, you know, that have been affected. Like, you know, the blacklisted worker was based on an interview that we did with my mum's ex-boyfriend who grew up in Trowbridge. You know, like, that's mad. It's really close to us. I think that's what we wanted to share, is like, this isn't something that's really far away, but, you know, Chris and Bianca both live in Cardiff. You know, Steve lives in Newport. Like, these are stories that are on our doorsteps in our neighborhood. They're part of our life, and they also impact this story impacts our lives because it stopped, you know, progressive change happening. Yeah, Chris can speak more about the politics.
Yeah. Chris, do you want to talk about the inquiry, or the wider politics behind this as well.
For the inquiry, it's been going on for 11 years. By the time it finishes, it'll be the longest ever running public inquiry, covering 42 years of spying, plus a few more. It's gonna go into a little bit stuff that happened after that, but into 2 units, which the Special Demonstration Squad, National Public Order Intelligence Unit, who spied on, as Rhiannon mentioned, predominantly activists on the left. At some point, there were some infiltrations into fascists, but very much a minority in terms of deployments. And there's so many things to say about it. I guess the most well-known thing about it, the most well-publicized thing about it, if anybody knows anything, it is about the sexual relationships. But I think that's also significant in the sense that their methodology wasn't just to spy on us when we were being activists in inverted commas. It was to spy on every aspect of our lives. So it wasn't just the sexual relationship. They went to our relatives' funerals, weddings. We worked with them. They lived with them. We drank with them. We done everything with them. So I think that's, I guess, one aspect. I mean, if I was going to pick one out of quite a lot, that's one aspect I would probably emphasize. In current surveillance legislation, there's this term called collateral intrusion, which basically means like collecting people spying on you, collecting information which isn't relevant to their investigation. But the reality was that collateral intrusion was their modus operandi. That's the way they worked. It was to literally scoop up every single bit of information they came across and put it in reports.
To no existence of a private life. It was entirely, nothing was off limits, basically.
Yeah.
We hear a lot from the right wing, actually, about the, the deep state, a lot in their narrative. But actually, it's nothing to do with them. It's clearly an operation that, an infrastructure that is there to spy on the other side, if that makes sense.
I think it's a difference between a conspiracy theory and a state conspiracy. One's real, one isn't. So basically, from the Russian Revolution in 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution, that was communism, and therefore anybody associated with the left was the surveillance state main preoccupation, briefly interrupted by the Second World War, until the end of the Cold War, for sure. And but even post Cold War, which mostly I'd done my activism after the Cold War finished, there was still this bias. They were still looking to something, if you like, to replace those people that they were the subversives. Subversive meaning communists, generally speaking, and therefore that bias continued. I think that's probably the best way of putting it.
My final question is sort of to finish. If there are young people out there listening, parents, carers who know a creative kid in their life, what would you say to them about getting into theatre, or even getting into activism as well, I suppose, or into sort of into theatre activism? What routes are there into the theatre sector, into expressing themselves about how to find theatre that talks to them and their lives? Rhiannon, do you want to give that a crack?
Yeah, my advice would be firstly to create the conditions to do that. I'm just like reflecting on Bianca, Chris, and me both talked about making and playing as kids and making theatre in the garden. All of that kind of stuff is so easy to do. Do you know what I mean? Go to the park, lay your kids out in the garden, give them some clothes to play with. Like, we can do it in our houses, we can do it in the street, we can do it out, with our mates. So my first thing would be do that. My second thing would be don't pay for these like mad expensive like stage school shit that is on offer. Like, find the independent ones. Like, I know Rubicon Dance do a dance class on a Saturday. It's £2. Pick your kids there. It's brilliant. We have a youth offer called Take Your Place, and we offer some youth workshops now and again. Like, it's free. Actually, we pay our kids expenses so they can attend. We sort them out food. There's other organisations in the city that might offer similar stuff. And then I would just encourage people to have a curiosity about the world and about different ideas of living, of politics, of just be curious, just go to the museum, it's free to go to, go and look at the art, go to the library, read, just like, yeah, fill your imagination.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. Bianca, do you have anything to say? Because I know, like, with your sisters and everything, maybe encouraging, maybe some of them are indicating they might want to go down this space, but what would you say to someone that wanted to get involved in theatre or into the arts?
First of all, I would say that they need to follow Commonwealth on social media for Take Your Place, because it's an amazing opportunity for young people. My sister's attended, I think, all of the workshops, and she loves them, and she brings all her friends along, and yeah, they've learned a lot and they've really grown as people as well. It's been really beautiful to watch. I would say don't stop playing. You're never too old to keep imagining and to keep playing. I attended a workshop, an improv workshop, and for most of the time when we were not even in the, like, you know, the workshop room, we were all just playing, and it was just like the feeling of being like 5 years old again, and it was really magical. Yeah, just keep playing, keep educating yourself, as Rhiannon said. It's important to educate yourself so that great theatre at the end of the day, relevant theatre, important theatre. Any opportunity to thrown at you, just say yes, because you never know where it may lead. You never know who you meet.
That's great. Yeah, say yes. And I love that piece about never sort of give up on your imagination as well. I think we sort of as adults, we're sort of educated out of us not to be a bit silly or to be, to commune with our inner child. Like, my best writing comes when I'm sort of thinking, what would that little kid who wanted to write all those years ago, what would he like? And I try to write for him sometimes, without it becoming too nostalgic as well, I suppose, trying to keep it for now.
I would just say to that as well, that with like, because sometimes when I'm writing, I'm always trying to get it right, and I'm always beating myself up if I don't get it right. But actually practicing, getting it wrong loads, it's like turning the tap on, isn't it? Waiting for the water to run clear. Like, you kind of have to do all the shit. Like, you have to go past all the shit bits to get to the good bit. And there is like an invitation not to be hard on yourself. Like you have to kind of go through that process. Only practicing will like help you get there.
Yeah, exactly. I go to a writing group at Chapter. I have done for 10 years. And Bryony, who runs it, she always says, you can't be critical of something that's just come out of your brain and landed on the page. There's no point in being critical of it, because it's sort of a newborn child, really. It's just like, it's there, it exists in the world. That's the only thing it needs to do, is exist. Yeah. But obviously we've all got our inner critic. We're all like, well, this is rubbish, or we've got society telling us, you can't be creative, you've got to do something productive. It's all about modes of production rather than enjoyment and learning about yourself. And also, I think there's that, we live in a society of instant gratification too, and the idea that we can make it big just by creating, seemingly without much effort. It only happens if you put the effort in,
Totally.
yeah, and you practice. Chris, have you got any advice of, you've obviously got involved in a bit of theatre through this, but also getting involved in activism, any lessons that you've learned or want to pass on to younger folk who want to get involved?
I was actually made to do theatre when I was in my comprehensive school, because I was deemed too sick to do a language. I think it was like streamed. It was like streaming, and yeah. I mean, I failed all my exams at school. So, but I would say what I was going to say out of that was, don't get put off by what you do at school. If you do theatre at school and it's terrible, that's probably my only useful tip in terms of getting involved in theatre. I do a lot of writing. It's not creative writing in inverted commas. I suppose, academic and analytical kind of writing. And just to echo what you both said, is that it does take a lot of drafting and redrafting. You do get better at it, but even when you get better at it, you have to catch yourself and learn, because generally your first draft isn't going to be up to scratch, no matter how many years you've been doing it. So you still got to keep yourself in check in that sense and realize that, one thing I've only realized since I've done lots of writing is that there's never a single author. There's like a whole bunch of people who comment and edit your work. So, obviously loads of books have one person's name by it, but there's probably a dozen people have inputted into that. So that's one thing to remember, that you can't do it by yourself, but you don't have to do it by yourself.
I think that's a really good way to conclude this episode of Sparrowfort, Making Political Theatre. My thanks to Chris, Rhiannon, Bianca and Taylor for being so generous with your time, for sharing your stories and contributing to this episode. I've linked to Commonwealth Theatre's website, their book, Do It Yourself, Making Political Theatre, information about the spycop inquiry, and a link to Taylor's website in the show notes. Sparrowfort is a Be the Change Media Network production. This episode was produced, written and edited by me, Tom Spare. The music from Demand the Impossible was produced by Commonwealth Theatre, directed by Rhiannon White, and written by Taylor Edmonds, all rights reserved. And the makers of the production granted me permission to use the music and clips from the theatre production, so I really appreciate that. I'm Tom Spare. Thanks for listening.
Never leaves me alone. Peace, love, happiness.